Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. It is June 2nd, 2019. Welcome you to the Bible Forum. I trust that you're doing well. I am doing well, betterer and betterer every day, as they say. And I do appreciate your prayers and all of your well wishes, some of the cards that were sent, and the gifts too. I really appreciate your love and kindness to pay attention. But I'm doing a little better. Sometime around Friday, the pain almost completely stopped suddenly. I don't know why. It's still there, but it's not like it was. Now I'm just tired. But I'm not too tired tonight. I've been resting up. I don't know if you know it or not. It was something that popped up late this week on the news cycle, and that was the Billy Graham Evangelical Association. They have assembled a coalition of 250 key Christian leaders across the country. People from James Dobson and Jerry Falwell Jr. to Mike Huckabee, Alveda King, others, to call for a special day of prayer for President Trump. The problem that I found with this was that they called for that special day of prayer to be today. And I didn't even see it until about Thursday or Friday of this week. Franklin Graham wrote on social media, quote, "I'm asking followers of Christ across our nation to set aside Sunday, June 2nd, as a special day of prayer for President Donald J. Trump. President Trump's enemies continue to try everything to destroy him, his family, and the presidency. In the history of our country, no president has been attacked as he has. I believe the only hope for him and this nation is God." He goes on to say that time is short. We need to pray for God to intervene. We need to ask God to protect, strengthen, encourage, and guide our president. We know that God hears and answers prayers. He can soften hearts. He can change minds. He is all-powerful, and he rules over the affairs of nations. The Bible instructs us in 2 Timothy chapter 2 to pray for those in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence. Why? For this is good, and it's acceptable in the sight of God our Savior. As I mentioned, the problem is the announcement appeared too late in the week for me, anyway. I don't know where it showed up in mainstream media. But it's a good idea to pray for the president, whoever he or she may be. But at this time, there is a tremendous pressure being brought to bear against this man. And I know very few men who could stand up under it. He does not seem to even be fazed by it. This is what comes from working in the construction industry in New York City and around the world, having to deal with the mafia. These people are not near as bad as that. Down at the border, what I saw at the border will break your heart, Collins said. Fox and Friends about his I told Fox and Friends about his border visit. He said the perverse incentives of U.S. immigration policies are causing this to happen. The Collins here is Representative Doug Collins from Georgia. He's a Republican. He says his experience at the border will break your heart. Collins met with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol and Immigration Customs Enforcement officials in El Paso, Texas, earlier last week. According to him, it was to see firsthand the crisis at our southern border. This Republican congressman's border visit comes at a time when border officials hit a record roundup in apprehensions of illegal immigrants, reaching 1,036 as of early Wednesday. The Georgia representative noted immigrants are looking for a free pass while putting children as young as 1, 2, and 3 months of age in danger to cross this border illegally, adding that Congress needs to fix this. While noting a bill proposed by the Congress member and Representative Mike Johnson from Louisiana in January to fix immigration loopholes, Collins said it would fix the Flores settlement, the credible fear part of asylum claims and trafficking in victims. Collins went on to blast congressional Democrats for wanting to, quote, use these immigrants and these migrants as pawns. Where's your bill? He asked his Democrat co-representatives. According to the BBC, 1 in 3 people around the world suffer from religious persecution, with Christians being the most persecuted religious group in the world. He said religion is at risk of disappearing in some parts of the world, and in some regions the level and nature of persecution is arguably coming close to meeting the international definition of genocide, a definition that was adopted by the United Nations. Why are Christians the most persecuted religious group? Christianity has done nothing but bring respect for all humanity, all human beings. Christianity elevates women, provides a sound form of government which has been the stabilizing force in the world for 200 plus years. Christianity brings a strong family unit, the protection of children, a sound economy, a stable political system, and laws which protect all people, not just wealthy and or the powerful. Could it be the persecution brought against Christianity is because of all of these accomplishments? Or it might be despite them. People have come to accept just about any religious opinion and or worship except biblical Christianity. Why is that? Well, if you're a Christian, you do know. It's because of Jesus. It's because of his legal, moral, divine right to rule in the hearts of men and women. The ancient cry, "We will not have this man to rule over us," is now being echoed in just about every nation and among just about every people group known to mankind. Who would orchestrate such a thing? Who could? The answer is Satan. The question of why is answered because he views himself as the king of the earth, and he doesn't share. He cannot abide competition. So instead of doing a better job, he's busy offering people an increasingly immoral agenda, which, by the way, they love. They love it because human beings are basically self-oriented God haters. That's what they are at their very core. Now you may argue with me on that point, but then why is the secular culture so determined to not follow divine principle? Lauren Chen from Blaze TV talked about a new study featured in the New York Times op-ed which found that, quote, the happiest of all wives in America are religious conservatives, followed by their religious progressive counterparts. Predictably, this op-ed caused a social media uproar, with many critics saying conservative wives will say whatever they're told to say, or they are happy because they don't know any better. Commenting, Lauren said, quote, we hear the idea pretty often that conservative women must be miserable and repressed. They're like the Handmaid's Tale, barefoot and in the kitchen. She goes on to say, I just think it's interesting that some of the women who are outright feminists don't understand that some women maybe don't think the way they do or have the same priorities they do. Because not only are they saying that they're not or they're happy not being religious or conservative, but that they, the religious conservatives, must also be unhappy. There's this assumption that being religious and conservative means literally like white Sharia. Amazing that the same people who want to be left alone about their life choices seem to be the most outspoken critics of those who are not like them. So-called religious people tend to be those who embrace the natural differences, finding peace, worth, and joy in just being who they are. Oh wait, that's what the counterculture says they are. A story out of Leander, Texas talks about the city of Leander canceling a controversial drag queen storytime event. This was to be held at the Leander Public Library. I've told you about these in the past. These people are working through the whole country trying to get drag queen story times in public libraries for small children. This was an event sponsored by a local church. Their rationale? They claim we must never stop striving for safe spaces for our kids to be unique and loved no matter what. Now, the obvious question here is, what are they talking about? Well, the answer is a culture where every crazy, dangerous, and destructive idea and belief is accepted as normal, and that the smallest children who can sit still and comprehend the language are the ones we're going to indoctrinate if we can. These people are not seeking to bring comfort to small children who are confused about their gender. They don't even know what the word gender is or how it impacts their life. That is, unless their parents and others have fed them these destructive ideas. One drag queen weighed in by saying, "I think it's been blown out of proportion for no reason. They're just reading a book. They're getting dressed up and they're reading a book, and it's honestly no different than if a character from one of those books came out and somebody had dressed up as that character to read." She's making the connection between a storybook character or a cartoon character designed for small children and a man dressed as a woman in a grotesque, exaggerated way, acting out attitudes and behaviors 3 to 5-year-old children do not understand and cannot possibly process objectively. And they're doing this why? To indoctrinate at the earliest possible age. And that many parents see nothing wrong with this is simply another indication of just how perverse our society has become. We haven't talked about this in years, but the Bilderbergers are meeting this week in Montreux, Switzerland. Topics for discussion this year include climate change and sustainability, Brexit, China, Russia, the future of capitalism, and the weaponization of social media. According to the official Bilderberg website, discussions are held under the Chatham House rule, which means participants can use any information they receive during the meeting but cannot reveal its source. This year will be the second time the Bilderberg meeting has been held in Switzerland. In 2011, it was held at St. Moritz in the southeast portion of Switzerland. This group has been meeting for the last 65 years under very secretive terms and to all sorts of criticisms and warnings. Just what is it are they doing? Well, their stated purpose is to simply discuss world affairs, presumably to achieve some sort of global consensus in order to provide some sort of direction. There is no mention or indication that anyone in this group is pulling the strings in terms of global control. Yet no doubt there is value in hearing the various opinions, and equally no doubt some of these opinions find their way into official government policies. Our own Secretary of State is scheduled to attend this year. Many of our top advisors and movers have been involved for decades, some from the very beginning. Several invitees, who at the time are relatively unknown, have gone on to be presidents of these United States, men like Bill Clinton, and/or key members of important committees and groups. The Bilderbergers are very influential in governments around the world, and their goal is to build some form of consensus as they talk about these things. I read this week that the 2017 solar eclipse was racist. I don't know how the sun gets to be racist, but a left-wing Brooklyn law professor by the name of Alice Ristoff railed against the racist sun for shining across states where hardly any black people live. The proof is the deplorable solar eclipse of 2017. If you go online and you look for it, you'll see that it forms a diagonal line beginning in Washington State and ending in Florida someplace. She says these folks are apparently whining that the path of totality, or the main path of the eclipse, passed mostly through states that voted for President Trump. She continued writing, "It has been dubbed the Great American Eclipse, and along most of its path there live almost no black people." This took 4,500 words in an article in the publication called The Atlantic. She said presumably this is not explained by the implicit bias of the solar systems. Still, an eclipse chaser is always tempted to believe that the skies are relaying a message. Ristoff detailed how the solar eclipse started in Oregon, which is mostly white, and then cut through pro-Trump states like Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri. She wrote, "From Kansas, the eclipse goes to Missouri, still mostly bypassing black people." Of course, as insane and as pseudo-intellectual as this whole article is, it's not the only left-wing media outlet that has slammed the solar eclipse's inherent racism. You haven't read about it. You're not on the end. You're probably part of the problem. The Satanic Temple has rejected a Supreme Court ruling that requires the burial or cremation of fetal remains. Citing a violation of its religious freedom, the organization insists that it should be exempt from the law. On Tuesday, the United States Supreme Court upheld Indiana law, which ensures that unborn babies are granted a respectful burial instead of being disposed of at landfill sites as common practice. Satanists don't care about people or babies or anybody. It's part of their creed. They don't care because their prince, Satan himself, doesn't care. We're going to stop here with some of these things. There's just too many of them to fit on one video, so we'll come back with part 2. Stay tuned.